Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Josh Nadье, and today we are going to be talking about LMS. So, first question, what exactly is LMS? What does this word even mean? So, the three letters here stand for Learning Management System. And basically what it is a way to bring together different parts of the learning experience into one whole. So think about it as a way to collect different tasks and put it into an easy to use system that has everything in front of you. So for example, what are some of the things that can be brought together into an LMS? So think about curriculum design, think about classroom activities, think about using online blackboards instead of physical blackboards, think about assigning homework, think about additional resources like videos, website links, research, think about communication between the teacher and the student. All of these things can be done online in an application or or on a website, a web platform. So that's basically in very short words what LMS is. And when people hear that, maybe they might be thinking, well, okay, that sounds interesting, but really, what is this doing that we aren't doing already? So we already have homework, we already have our curriculums, we already have our video presentations and our additional resources. What is it that LMS does that we aren't already doing? Because when we think about such a big system, one of the main concerns can be, aren't we just giving ourselves a lot more work by moving everything over from our traditional methods into this online platform? And so today, we're going to be talking a little bit about those objections and about the different things that we can do with LMS that we can't do physically, and how that can improve our classroom experience and the classroom experience of our students. So let's begin.
One of the huge benefits of a learning management system, or LMS, is that it gives students the opportunity to learn independently. So, first, let's take a small look at the history of how technology has helped us learn, and we'll look at how these developments have made LMSs possible. If we start thinking about the first self-teaching machines, we can look back to 1924 at a machine created by a man named Sidney Presey. He called it the testing machine. It was a very basic typewriter, and it had two windows to look in. The first had a question, and once you pressed a few buttons, the other window would show you the answer. This marked the first machine that let you study by yourself. While the first testing machine let students test themselves, it wasn't until 1956 that the very first adaptive learning systems were being developed. One of them, probably one of the more famous ones, was called Saki. What adaptive learning is when computers are able to know what you've learned, what you're having trouble learning, and what you need to learn next, and this is both in the classroom and out. If you've had some problems with, for example, mathematics or modal verbs, the computer would test you more on these subjects. This would go on to become a major feature in many present-day platforms and applications. As time went on, of course, technology improved, and in 1970 we saw the first desktop computer, made by Hewlett-Packard, or HP, be released. While this might not seem to be a major step for learning, it gave people access to technology that would eventually lead to laptops, smartphones, and tablets. This makes learning, accordingly, not only accessible, but portable. Then in 2002 we saw the creation of Moodle, which is really the first actual LMS as we know it, the grandfather of them all. It was an open source technology that allowed for a platform between students and their teachers, or students and their materials, or even just students between students. Content could be shared and added in a centralized location. Moodle wasn't just the first,
but it continues to be one of the most used platforms today. Although the first LMS was created 6 years previous, it wasn't until 2008, with the creation and popularity of the cloud, that the potential of the LMS was really able to show itself. So, the cloud is something that allows us to share our files and information not only on our computers, but also on a larger, geographically independent network. This allows for different devices to access the same information. And this is what really helps students and teachers collaborate on different projects. So, for us to really develop the LMS that we know today, there needed to have been a number of different innovations. First, we needed the technology that would help us learn and study independently. And then we needed the ability to access different kinds of information over time and across different devices. So with all of these pieces finally brought together, today's learning management systems allow us as teachers to create a more immersive, independent experience for our students. All of this is an interesting history lesson, but what does it mean for you as a teacher, and how can you use an LMS in your classroom? Well, the innovations we've been speaking about have led to a number of features to be developed. And so let's take some time to look at some of them. So when we talk about using an LMS in the classroom, one of the biggest things that we think about is how can this new technology change the way that we actually interact with students in real time. And one of the most important ways that this technology can help us is by using digital blackboards. You can have spontaneous class construction activities. For example, you can ask your elementary level students, what's the difference between, and you can say, ducks and crows. You can place text across the screen, you can do things with it, you can draw pictures, you can ask one but not the other. Or in some, you could actually bring in visual content. And with these visual elements, you can actually start to include these other aspects of the educational process. These exercises can be spontaneous or they can be planned. For example, a lesson on using the infinitive after adjectives to talk about reasons, after certain verbs. It can even be used to create group activities where everyone does these exercises together. For example, I'm good at listen to people, I'm good at to listen to people, or I'm good at listening to people. Students can engage with each other in class, or they can do exercises like these on their own devices and even contribute to the greater learning experience. Another one of the most exciting and game-changing elements of an LMS is the ability to assign homework and other tasks directly on the platform. This is usually attached to something like an account that the student would have on an LMS. For example, on this account, we might have an option to look at practices. So this would allow the student to take a look at different homework tasks, as well as look at what his marks were and how he did in the assignment. There's often also a kind of folder section where students can look at previous lessons to be able to review and study for their examinations or just for their own personal benefit. So now you've seen how things like a blackboard that can be used in class can be linked to homework that's done outside of class on the exact same platform through an LMS. And this opens up lots of different options for getting material to your students. Another way that this can be done is by selecting additional resources. So let's say inside class you want to show a talk, a TED Talk, for example. If there's a link to that specific video on the internet, you can put this as a link in the page that corresponds to that lesson. So nothing gets lost and everything can be updated, everything can be looked back at. Additionally, with all of these things being kept track of, you can log into and look at each student and how they're progressing. So for example, you can look at their profile for their information, their course history to see what courses they've been part of. You can also look at their attendance perhaps. You might be able to see if you're teaching language, what words they're learning, what homework they've been doing. So all of this can take place right there on the platform.
And if this is a feature that's included in the LMS that you're going to be using, this can come out as a kind of progress tracking. So with everything right there, you don't have to lose track of anyone. You're not going to be looking for papers that you put in a binder somewhere. You don't have to look through archives. Everything is accessible, and not just for you, but it's also accessible for your students to see how they're doing. If you're teaching a class in a business, for example, maybe the head staff would like to know how their staff are doing progress-wise. So this enables lots of different ways for doing that. Some LMSs also provide visual aids, so perhaps charts for different students, perhaps some kind of pie graph for their learning details, because understanding how and when you're learning can help you to reach your goals in a much shorter time. Earlier, when we were talking about the different technological developments that have made LMSs possible, we also talked about the cloud. And if you remember, the cloud is the way that we are able to store information online so that things aren't stored in one central computer, but on a network that's accessible for other computers. And so one thing that this makes possible is distance learning. When we talk about the ways that a learning management system makes us more independent, this distance learning is one of these main ways. So it's not just about maybe one of your students can continue doing their work while they're away, but it also means creating classrooms that are not geographically dependent. So there are some really great platforms out there, for example, Coursera or Open University. On these platforms, there are students that are made up of people from all over the world. And so this creates lots of very interesting ways for students to communicate with each other, coming from different backgrounds, different regions. And so you might not have this physical classroom, but you have this global classroom instead. So let's take a look at some of these other platforms. This one right here is Coursera, for example. And one of the main features of this platform is that it offers courses that are accredited by different universities. For example, here, Penn University, Stanford, UC San Diego. So these are some pretty big names in America. And some of their professors, as well as other professionals, are offering courses on things as varied as Bitcoin to programming to science to business to investment. And these are all provided on by distance learning. And so these are classrooms that are made of people from varying different backgrounds. This right here, though, has more of a top-down approach. So there is still definitely a person who is a teacher and a person who is a student. On another platform, let's say Skillshare, it still has this classes element, but this is something that can be done outside of a university. This is something that can be done by anybody. They can create these courses. And so street photography, logo design, branding, knife skills, music mixing. And so these are all different options that are explored on this learning platform. There are a lot of advantages that come with distance learning, but this might also make some teachers feel uncomfortable. After all, the classroom is really, it's the ground zero of where we are. It's where we do what we do. It's what makes us as teachers. But it also is something that allows students this extra dimension of learning. If you're learning on a screen, maybe you can't participate in the same way as if you're in a class answering a question or talking to your group mates. While all of these different objections are legitimate, building interactivity into a learning management system is an important feature that more and more different LMS platforms are beginning to do. So, for example, when you're within a session, maybe you can be asking questions to the instructor. Maybe you have chat boxes open to discuss different things with your classmates. Maybe these whiteboards are interactive, not just something that the teacher can use, but maybe this is an ability that can be shared with the students themselves. And when multiple people are using these blackboards, then there's a much more engaged experience, and in the end, the student can be seen to be a co-creator with the teacher of this same classroom experience. In fact, when you're in a classroom with, say, 15 to 30 other people, maybe you're not going to be getting this individualized attention, right? Maybe you're not going to be as encouraged to participate. But using an LMS where there's an interactivity element to it, maybe somebody who might not feel as comfortable speaking up or participating in class, maybe this person would be able to find a way to contribute something to this experience. And that would enrich not just their class experience, but that of their teachers and that of their fellow students as well. But for some time now, we've been discussing about the benefits of a learning management system to teachers, to students, but there's still a really important part of the teaching experience that we haven't talked about yet, the administration. Including the dimension of administration tasks onto the LMS allows for every aspect of the educational experience to then take place on this platform. So here, we're not just talking about what a student is learning or how fast or is the teacher doing things in an interactive way enough. Here, we're talking about who's coming to class, we're talking about information, we're talking about contact, we're talking about scheduling. And so on a number of different platforms, there's this option for administrators to use the different tools, and this allows everything again to happen in one spot. So, for example, if there was some kind of miscommunication between when somebody was going to have class or when somebody was going to postpone their classes, every single time that a change takes place, everything is recorded on the platform. And this not just helps everybody to be on the same page, but it also creates this really in-depth archive of every single student that was working with the platform, and who they are, how often they came to class, were there any issues that came up, and all of these things would be recounted in the notes. And so this can also be a way for a school to follow up on an old client. Maybe somebody was going to take a break for the summer and then said, oh, okay, I would like to start in September. Or maybe somebody had a special request saying, I would like to start in October instead. All of these different things can be recorded as notes within the administrative part of an LMS. These notes can also be really useful for teachers because, say, when one group is changing teachers from one to another, that teacher can write down, okay, here's what I did, here was what was working really well, here were requests for things they didn't really like doing in class. And so not only will the teacher have this guide coming into this new class, they're not just walking in blind, but also then this again becomes part of an archive of that student. And so even if there wanted to be at some point some kind of review of what kind of students do we have, what can we learn about them, are there any patterns that are there in terms of who's studying and when, all of this can be recorded in one easy, accessible place. And so that's a little bit about what learning management systems are and how you can use and incorporate an LMS into your school and into your classroom. Again, there will be people who say that it might not be worth it for them to switch over all of these files onto the new one. Maybe they miss the paper record keeping, maybe they miss the textbooks, but at the same time, teachers can incorporate an LMS into their classroom to the degree that they feel comfortable or the degree to which they feel it is useful. So maybe some will use a blackboard, but will assign homework on paper. Maybe somebody would use the administrative tasks, but leave the communication to some other kind of platform. Again, though, the potential is here. It brings everything together. It allows for progress to be tracked. It allows for everything to be archived. It allows people to come in from a distance. And so there's many, many different features. And still, history is only beginning. And there are lots of interesting potential ways that learning management systems can grow. We've seen over the past couple years the development of augmented reality. And so this is something that can be used. Imagine if smartphones could be used in class to show different phenomenon. in science, or to talk about different things about culture, especially in language classes. And so there's lots of space to grow, and there's lots of room to join in. And so I just wanted to thank you very much today for listening, and yes, enjoy the rest of our seminar. Bye-bye.